Let me just set the table for you. We're living through a period where the old guardrails are off. There is this war in the Middle East. It's a real war, and I do believe it is over, with the United States and Israel on one side and Iran on the other side. And it does not seem like we have any help from NATO, and our U.S. border, for the first time in a decade, is actually being enforced. A president who tweets, their truths now, like a man who's given up on being liked and has decided to just do the job that we elected him to do. I particularly like that style. That's how I am. No fluff. Just tell it like it is. So I've been struggling with the media establishment. There seems like it's like an open revolt against the voters who elected President Trump, and then the Catholic Church, my church, whose American-born Pope has decided that his megaphone is going to use it for politics, which I'm okay with. I feel he has a right to do that. But here's what I want you to hold in your head as a frame for tonight. Just keep in your head that every single one of those fights is a downstream of a deeper fight. And the deeper fight is about whether reality is something we receive or something we invent, and whether there's a moral order baked into creation, a natural law, or whether it's all just power vibes and whoever screams loudest on social media. I personally believe it is a moral order given to us by God, and we're not to let that noise filter in. The Catholic answer is that reality is given to us. God made it. We conform ourselves to it, and that's what ordered is. It means in our tradition. St. Augustine talked about order, like the right ordering of love. Do you love God first, your spouse, your children, and then your stranger? And so that, in that sense, that stranger doesn't matter. I mean, he matters enormously, but in the sense that you cannot love everyone. I have told my family my bandwidth, because I am a single woman that's constantly putting up barriers to protect not just my body, but my mind, because the mind is the root to your soul. So we can't love everybody. And the ones that are on the low end of your receiving of your love, they should understand that. And if they don't, that's on them. It's not for something for you to like worry your pretty little head about. So when that order collapses, you get what we're seeing. It's a generation that can't tell you what tradition is. They don't know what secularism is. And so they're confused. Like, we've got a whole generation that's confused about how many genders we have. You know, you ask one person, it's 2 genders. You ask someone else, 72 genders. So when you're talking about foreign policy, something that swings between just an open-ended war, and then like a border that for years was treated as just like anybody could come in, just a suggestion. It's not really a thing. And you've got churches in Europe being burned. You've got innocents being killed. You've got clergy, Christian and Catholic clergy, being murdered. And the people in charge are trying to frame it. Jesus was a pacifist, or the real problem is not what we think it is. That's not politics. That's disordered love. And I know as nurses, we deal with disordered love at the bedside. Disorder always looks like love. And that's the tell. And that's what I'm leading to. So with that frame, let's talk about the Holy Father. I want to start this segment by saying something very clearly, because I know it matters to a lot of you, and it does matter to me. I love the papacy. I have revered my Catholic faith, and I revere the chair of St. Peter. I believe Pope Leo is the lawful successor of the apostle and is the vicar of Christ on earth. I do not question any of that, and I will not question any of that. Anybody that tells you, and anyone who tells you that critiquing a pope's political opinions makes you a heretic or a schismatic, is trying to confuse you, or they're lying to you. And it's generally really not the Catholics. Well, maybe the liberal Catholics will try to do that. But the hardcore traditional Catholics know that it's okay to question the Pope. It's your duty to make sure that he is just. And so here's why the Catholic Church has always drawn a distinction, and the Catechism is crystal clear on this, between what the Pope teaches infallibly when he speaks ex cathedra on faith and morals, and what he says as a private theologian, a pastor, a commentator, or a man with opinions. The first we receive with the assent of faith. The second we receive with respect. But we are allowed and even obligated to weigh it, to have an opinion on it. That would not be Catholic if we were not able to have an opinion on it. And so scripture itself tells us this. Galatians chapter 2, St. Paul says he opposed Peter to his face. And the faith, this is when Peter's conduct was leading the faithful astray. That's not heresy. That's sainthood. St. Catherine of Siena, a doctor of the church, a consecrated virgin, barely literate, wrote to Pope Gregory VI and told him to get back to Rome and do his job. That's not heresy, that's sanctity. So when I speak about Pope Leo tonight, understand I am not speaking against the office of the Pope. I am speaking from within the faith that office protects. So with that said, now Pope Leo was elected last May after the death of Pope Francis. He's the first American Pope. He's from Chicago. He's an Augustinian. And for the first few months, a lot of American Catholics, especially the kind that listen to this podcast, thought, good, finally, a Pope who understands us. I thought that. I wanted that. And that's not what I got. So in September, the Holy Father said people who support what he called the inhuman treatment of immigrants in the United States are not necessarily pro-life. In October, he met with Catholics from El Paso who were afraid to go to Mass because of ICE activity. In November, he publicly called the administration's posture towards migrants extremely disrespectful and called for deep reflection. And in the last 2 weeks, as the Iran conflict escalated, he has condemned the war in the strongest of terms, saying God does not bless any conflict. He even invoked the Prince of Peace, and going so far as to suggest that people contact their representatives and reject war always. So then on April 12th, 60 Minutes ran a segment with the three, I think they're American cardinals. They are aligned politically with the Pope. Most of them were appointed by Pope Francis, who had a very liberal bend, criticized the president. These three cardinals criticized the president's conduct of the war and his social media posts. And roughly an hour later, President Trump went on Truth Social and called the Holy Father weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy. I also have to mention that Pope Leo did not meet with President Trump, although he should as the President of the United States. He should meet with all of the leaders, but especially if there's a conflict that he is wanting to take to social media on. And he has that right to do. We all have that right to take to social media with an opinion. However, he met with David Axelrod, who is Obama's PR person. And then this hit piece with the three American cardinals came out in 60 Minutes. So that's suspect. And here we are. So let me say what I actually think. First, on immigration. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 2241, says two things in the same breath. It says prosperous nations are obliged to welcome the foreigner when they can. And it says, and I'm paraphrasing this, that immigrants are obliged to respect the laws and heritage of the country that receives them, and that political authorities may regulate immigration for the common good. Both are Catholic teachings. You are not required as a Catholic to believe in open borders. You are not permitted as a Catholic to hate the migrant. The Holy Father has emphasized one side of that teaching, one side only. A faithful Catholic can respectfully emphasize the other, and that's not rebellion, that is balance. Second, on war. Catholic teaching on just war is not pacifism. It never has been. If you Know your Catholic history. The Catholics have been persecuted with holy wars throughout the existence of the church. Catechism lays out the criteria. You can read for yourself in the Catechism, paragraph 2309. A Catholic can, in good conscience, believe that a given military action meets those criteria. A Catholic can also disagree. What you cannot do is pretend the church has always been pacifist, because it hasn't. Popes have blessed crusades. Popes have excommunicated aggressors. The tradition is nuanced. I get that. But when the Holy Father invokes the Prince of Peace to suggest no Christian can ever support any use of force, that is not a dogmatic pronouncement. I hear liberals say Jesus was pro-peace, anti-war, and yes, but when your way of life as a Christian is being attacked and threatened, there is a just there. The Pope has an obligation, because if he is pushing woke politics, his open borders, his stance on immigration, his stance on war, that is using the seat to push an agenda. Third, I want to be honest with you, it is very painful, and I mean genuinely painful for me, who has thrown everything I've got into the Catholic Church because of attacks, spiritual attacks, misunderstandings about who I am, and just being a sensitive person. But to watch a pontiff use his platform to repeatedly, publicly by name, critique the elected leader of the country where a majority of Catholics voted for that leader. It is painful, because I know what it does. It gives the power away, and it gives cover to every lukewarm Catholic on every cable news panel to say, see, I told you, even your Pope agrees with me. It gives ammunition to people who have hated the Catholic Church their whole lives. And it leaves faithful Catholics wondering whose side their shepherd is actually on. And that is not heresy to say that. That is a deep feeling of grief. And I will continue to pray for the Holy Father and for our church every day. And I pray that the Holy Spirit guides him. I pray for the conversion of hearts, myself included. And I will continue as a layperson with a brain, the brain that God gave me, to distinguish between the office which is divine and the opinions which are human. So I do need to go on, because we need to talk about the 60 Minutes segment, the hit piece, because it deserves its own discussion. I don't know if any of you saw, but on April 12th, CBS aired a segment featuring the three American cardinals speaking very critically about our president and his Iran war posture, his social media posts, his immigration enforcement, and no opposing voice, no administration rebuttal, no faithful Catholic perspective defending the right of a sovereign nation to control its border or wage a just defensive war against a regime that wants the U.S. demolished. Three cardinals, one agenda in 60 Minutes, which is a leftist propaganda arm. So this week, the New York Sun reported that a formal complaint has been filed alleging the segment was, in their words, neither fair nor unbiased. What I want to tell you is something more important. This is what happens when institutions lose their mission. And like nursing has a mission. It's in our code of ethics: advocate for the patient, do no harm, tell the truth. When a nurse abandons that mission, when she starts practicing her own politics instead of her profession, that is when people die. Journalism has a mission too. It used to be, above all else, tell the reader or the viewer what happened, both sides, truthfully and unbiased. And when journalism abandons that mission, it becomes a PR tool. And the church has a mission: the salvation of souls. When any arm of the church, a pope, a cardinal, a diocesan office communication person starts functioning like a progressive advocacy group. It's doing the same thing CBS through 60 Minutes is doing. It's confusing its job. 60 Minutes could have put a cardinal who is in support of President Trump, a cardinal that remembers the history of the Islam takeover and the killing of innocent Christians. That was not mentioned in this hit piece, and there was not another one done. So the laity are not required to swallow that. We have eyes, we have catechisms, and we have the saints. And I'll add one more thing I noticed, and you may have noticed it too, that when the segment aired, there was a lot of talk about the president's tone, his tweets, his meme. I laughed so hard about that meme, by the way. That was brilliant. His word choices. There was much less talk about what he was actually doing, enforcing the law, protecting his U.S. border, pushing back against a regime in Tehran that stones women, hangs homosexual, and has spent for decades, 40 years, calling for the destruction of Israel and the United States. You want to talk about dignity of the human person? Let's talk about that regime. 60 Minutes didn't talk anything about that. And that tells you that that segment was a hit piece. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you. I haven't been on the pod because I've really focused on getting the last minute editing. I had to do some legal hoops, and I'm redoing the cover of the book for publishing, but I had to get this out because it's good. So if you are listening to this, please, if you have a comment, tweet, DM me. Thank you for listening. Anyways, God bless. Thank you.